Sisters. The Novel. Part 1. Brita. Chapter 6. The First Admirers. Nothing, of course, scared those men off. Just a few weeks into our operations, and I could already recognize some regulars in the shop. Usually on their own, they would walk in, having ignored both the sign on the facade and the length of the trousers in front of them. They would pass through to other sections, and I even saw some of them take a bathrobe or a coat off the rack. They didn't know about CCTV cameras hung here and there, or maybe simply chose not to notice them, and more than once, I witnessed them melt with pleasure as they held up against their bodies those extra-long items, measured to fit somebody at least a foot taller. The most joyful act for those guys was, evidently, to try on a bathrobe and see its flaps sweep the floor, then lift the hangers as high as they could, only to make sure that the lower end of the garment was still touching their shoes. After that, as they'd leave the secluded corner, their faces would invariably read, "Well, I'm not tall, and I'm definitely not a woman, but I'm looking for a present for my missus here, and you can't stop me from doing this. We live in a free country, after all, and there's no law preventing me from entering a tall girl shop, is there?" To be honest, it wasn't at all easy to tell those pretending to have very tall wives or girlfriends from those who actually did have one, or both, for that matter. There were at least a couple of these short, fat men, cocooned in Gucci or Versace, accompanied by beauties 2 heads taller than them. The mystery would normally clear as soon as they'd open their mouths. Russians. I could recognize the accent because I used to have a very good friend of mine, one of the prettiest fashion models around, who was from a small town in Siberia. She used to tell me tons of stories about men like this. She called them New Russians. Allegedly, they were uneducated, stupid, tasteless, and arrogant, but immensely rich, and simply loved to have blonde bombshells by their side. The taller, the better. If you're enjoying the story, or even if you're not, please like or dislike it, share, and leave a comment. Positive or negative, they are all welcome. And do visit my page on Patreon, where you'll find new stories as well as the familiar ones. Patreon.com/AlexSteak. Thank you. Their bodies, resembling pears or watermelons, were reminders of their youth. Mostly, they used to be wrestlers, boxers, or weightlifters turned racketeers. A decade later, many of them were brutally killed, others imprisoned, but some, the most cruel and fortunate of them, apparently, reinvented themselves as entrepreneurs. They started buying huge houses, oceanic yachts, fast cars, and expensive tickets to every fashion show on earth in an attempt to find a young and gorgeous model who could help them fulfill their dream of becoming a stereotypical millionaire. And I must admit, the girls that accompanied those New Russians were not just pretty, they were gorgeous, and I couldn't find a single trace of plastic surgery in them, no matter how hard I tried. Looking at them, I recalled my colleague from Siberia, and thought that Russia was indeed a superpower, if only women's beauty counted. And these girls were not only pretty. Most of them were my potential customers. They were tall. Impressively tall, I should add. They towered over their men by a head and sometimes by shoulders as well. Although they usually wore exquisite and undoubtedly expensive stiletto shoes, I don't think any of them would be shorter than 6'5" even barefoot. A New Russian or not, a genuine tall women's admirer or a fake, every man is allowed to spend in Crystal as much as he likes or stay there as long as he pleases. No one would try to stop them provided, of course, they behaved, but this would always be the case, no matter what business you run, would it not? Well in advance, I'd instructed my girls not to irritate customers with meaningless questions like, "Can I help you?" or looking for something in particular. They were expected to be nearby, of course, but their role was to assist, not annoy. The only barrier on the customer's path was John the doorman, whose primary task was to get rid of hooligans, but thankfully, in that area, there weren't many chances of seeing one. So normally, John, wearing a specially made livery, would only greet customers with a broad smile and open the heavy oak door for them. "Oh, madam, you look terrific today," he'd say so convincingly that even the ugliest creature on earth would believe him. "Let me take your parasol, and one of the girls will be happy to assist you in case you need any help." My employees loved him as much as I did. And the girls themselves were, by the way, an attraction for men, whose primary purpose for visiting was to see a tall woman. None of them was shorter than Branca's 6'5", and the tallest, a Dutch woman named Carolina Glutch, stood a whopping 6'11", according to her application form. I suspect she's at least an inch or two taller, but she didn't seem to be too happy with her prominent stature. I never saw her wear heels, for example, and quite often, while talking to a shorter customer, and there was no customer taller than Carolina, she slouched. Save for that, she was lovely, not as pretty as the Croatian of course, but still cute, with big gray eyes and neatly cut green-blue hair. To be continued. If you're enjoying the story, or even if you're not, please like or dislike it, share, and leave a comment. Positive or negative, they are all welcome. And do visit my page on Patreon, where you'll find new stories as well as the familiar ones. Patreon.com/Alex Steak. Thank you.